crypto market expectations for 2024. GM friends, welcome to Web3 Academy, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. We're here to make sense of an on-chain world in constant transformation. I'm Kyle Reedhead, your host for today's episode. And today we're going to talk about what we expect for 2024 in terms of markets. We'll look at Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, compare a little bit to what happened last cycle for those of you that weren't around, and sort of contrast that to what is happening and may happen in this current cycle. If you notice, I've got a new background today. I actually am in Argentina, and that's why this is coming out a day later. Usually market watches go out on Wednesday. Today it's going out on Thursday, and that's just because I was traveling. I was on a plane for almost 24 hours, so I'm a little bit tired at the moment, but we're going to get through this. It's been a wild day, and that is the main reason why I really wanted to get this out in time for you. If you haven't checked, last week we did a review of markets last year in 2023, and I think that really gave a good foundation to understand what happened and why it all happened last year. And now we're moving into what's going on in this coming year. So yeah, stay tuned. This is going to be a great episode. We're going to dive into what just happened today because markets tanked completely over the last couple hours here just before I clicked record. And then we're going to look at what is happening over the next quarter to the rest of the year. Okay, so let's just quickly look at what just happened here. So we had a bit of a run up in the first day of January. It looked like, okay, January 2024 was going to be very bullish for us and things were looking really good. And then all of a sudden, Solana just this morning went from, $109 it was down to 84 in a matter of less than an hour. Crazy. Ethereum, Bitcoin all did the same thing. So Ethereum was close to 2,400, about 2,380, and it dipped down all the way to about, let's see here, 2,100. So a big jump down. And then Bitcoin, same thing, was up at 4,500, 45.5 almost, and dipped down to 41. So quite a jump, to be honest, but this should be expected. And so this is one of the things I want to talk about of what's going to happen in my opinion this year is I think it's going to be an up-only year. We're going to see some really, really big returns, but we need to expect pullbacks like this. And to be honest, probably even bigger pullbacks than what we saw today. It's very common to see 30 to 40% pullbacks that will happen in a couple days. And I'll show you some examples of that in just a second. But let's just talk about what just happened. In case you weren't aware, if you haven't seen, the reason this happened, supposedly, I guess we still don't know for sure, but it's likely what happened here was that some company called Matrix Port, which is a company that really no one knows in the space, is not really the most legitimate thing ever, but they just put out an article saying that they expect the SEC to reject the Bitcoin spot ETFs this week. That was it. They said probably we'll see a 20% decrease in Bitcoin price as a result, and that was it. But it wasn't for sure this was happening or a rumor that it's happening. It was just an opinion piece. For whatever reason, it spread around Twitter and markets dumped as a result of it. It's very similar to what happened a few weeks ago when the intern at Cointelegraph or whatever said that the BlackRock ETF was approved and all of a sudden the markets, spiked up 10% or whatever it was in a matter of an hour. It's very similar, except the opposite way. So quite funny. But really what happened here is the reason why things dumped so much is because we started to have a lot of open interest. And so what that means is leverage in the markets. So really what happened is that article spooked a bunch of people, okay? Some people market sold. So they sold a bit of their Bitcoin, ETH, whatever, but not enough that it would actually, knock things down 10, 20% like it did. What actually happened here is it was liquidations. So there was a lot of leverage in the markets. Funding rates were about 66% annualized. So very high funding, which is basically just degens doing what degens do. People were speculating the Bitcoin ETF was supposed to get approved this week and still might, who knows. And so there was a lot of people that were over leveraged. And within less than an hour, we saw $500 million in liquidations. I think the last thing I saw here was actually $1 billion in liquidations. So that's what actually made markets dump so much. And then I think people realized, oh, this was just a spook. It's not that big of a deal. And so we're already seeing things start to climb back up. I mean, Bitcoin's back up to 43,335 as I'm recording this, just a few hours after all this happened. Ethereum is at 2236 and Solana is at $100 again. So if you had a chance and you happen to buy on that dip, then you did really, really well in a matter of a couple minutes, really. So this is why you want to be prepared in these markets for these sort of things. You don't want to get scared when they happen. Instead, you want to actually be ready and have money ready to buy when we see these pullbacks, because again, this will happen 10 times this year. I would bet it happens close to 10 times. And so let's walk through what is going to happen. The last thing actually I just want to comment on this is, so crypto has a lot of leverage, which means it can move. That's why it's very volatile, right? And so news, things like this, like we just saw with Cointelegraph a few weeks ago, this one, it can move markets very, very fast. It's not just random. It's not just a coincidence. There are, like, the big boys are coming into this industry now. I mean, BlackRock's getting an ETF, et cetera. There's a chance that they wanted to buy some Bitcoin. They wanted to seed their ETF at a lower price. And so they spook the markets this way, right? They don't even need a news report. They can just dump a bunch of Bitcoin real quick. It liquidates a bunch of people. Price goes down way more than they actually liquidated themselves. Then they buy back in much lower. This happens a lot. And this is why we'll see so many pullbacks over this bull cycle. Again, this happens every single cycle. And it's the big players, the big whales that can manipulate markets. Remember, Bitcoin is still under $1 trillion, Ethereum even smaller, Solana even smaller. And so the crypto industry is just small. And these whales, whether they're big banks, whether they're just like big investors, whether they're central banks, like we don't know who's doing all this, but they can control markets pretty easily. And especially when so many people are leveraged, it's very easy to blow up markets like this and then buy back in really, really low. And that's likely why we saw such a jump back just from these markets, just from that. So anyway, something to be aware of. Sometimes it's good to have buy orders on at certain low levels because you just might get them. If you do, it's just a gift. But anyway, that's what happened here just on January 3rd. And we should expect more of this. Now, what do we think is going to happen over 2024? So, I mean, I've talked a lot on this show. I think 2024 is going to be a very bullish year. I believe that for many reasons. One, we have the Bitcoin spot ETF likely to be approved in the next week, regardless of what Matrix Port or whoever that is says. It's likely to be approved. So we have that. That's a really, really big deal. It's a trade agreement from the TradFi world to the crypto world, likely to bring a lot of demand, a lot of inflows in from many, many, many people around the world or around the US now that can allocate to Bitcoin. Then we have the Ethereum spot ETF coming sometime in, I believe, May, so Q2 of 2024. Obviously, another big demand shock for the space, specifically for Ethereum there, but likely everything catches a bid if that happens, because if a smart contract platform gets an ETF, it's very likely that others will at some point. I don't know that they will happen in 2024, but it's a big sign for the space. Outside of those, which obviously are a big deal and have been a big reason for the run-up we've had in 2023, we have macro really moving in our favor. Inflation continues to go down. Interest rates have been on pause for a little while. And in the last session that we saw from Jerome Powell from the Fed, they said they're likely to lower interest rates 3 times in 2024. So that's a really big sign. They said they'll lower it by 75 basis points over those 3 cuts. But I would bet, and I'm betting this with my actual investments, that they're going to cut a lot more than that. I think they cut more than 3 times, and I think they cut more than 75 basis points. Whether that's 100 to, I don't know how low they'll go, but probably 100 to 200 at least in 2024. That's my bet, but let's see. And I think that happens as soon as probably Q2 2024. And I'll explain why that matters and what happens when that happens. So anyway, I think that happens. And then I think liquidity comes back. I think we start to print a lot more money. We're in an election year, which generally coincides with printing a lot of money. So there's a lot of bullish reasons and a big bullish setup for this year. So what does that look like? Well, we had a very similar setup back in 2020. So if we look at a previous cycle, which is what I have up on the screen here, let's start with Bitcoin. Bitcoin had its run up in 2018 and then went down. We had a long bear market. And then in 2019, it saw a big run up, almost like a correction back to just fair value sort of thing, which is exactly what we saw here in 2023. And then it sort of in 2024, it actually had a pullback, end of 2019 had a bit of a pullback, started to climb back up. COVID hit. So that obviously impacted markets. And then we just had a big run up from there. The reason was interest rates went down to 0. Government started printing money. And so it was risk on, just full on risk on. And Bitcoin absolutely took off from that moment on. And in no time reached all-time highs, which was by December of 2020, or I guess November of 2020, it reached all-time highs. Yeah. And then basically blew by it for the rest of the year to 2021. And then that's when we reached our top. So this was sort of a macro environment that was set up perfectly for something like Bitcoin to do really, really well. Liquidity was increased, interest rates were decreased. That's really the big setup that we had. And then, I mean, everyone was locked in their rooms, so they had nothing to do but speculate on crypto, right? On digital assets. So the same thing happened with ETH. right? We had the top back in 2018, then we went down into a bear market. It ran up at the end of 2019, had a big pullback again. Same thing happened with COVID, and then it just basically shot up from there on, right? Had a really, really, really big year in 2020, but really it was 2021 that was huge for Ethereum, bringing it up to, let's see, it started the year below 900 and then shot up to 5,000. So it did a 5x in 2021. So a pretty big year. And if we look at the Bitcoin ETH chart, which I have up right here on the screen, it really had Ethereum really began to have a big move against Bitcoin in 2021, not in 2020, which is when the bull market really started. Bitcoin was the big winner of 2020, okay? We had Michael Saylor buying, it was the first time he ever put Bitcoin on his balance sheet at MicroStrategy. Paul Tudor Jones, a big investor, said that, he bought Bitcoin. And so it kind of had its moment first. And then, as you can see from this chart, then Ethereum really picked up and just took off. And that's when Ethereum just absolutely annihilated Bitcoin. That was in the early 2021. And so even if we look at Bitcoin dominance, so this is the Bitcoin market cap versus the rest of the market cap in crypto, same sort of thing. We had Bitcoin do really, really well, right? It dominated throughout the bear market through 2019 and 2019, and then sort of just like stayed up at the top, reaching its sort of peak here at the end of 2020. That's when it surpassed all-time highs. And then the rest of the crypto market just completely took over, and Bitcoin's dominance went from 73% down to below 40%. So a massive move in a matter of months. And so my thinking here is we're going to have the same sort of thing play out this cycle. So right now, Bitcoin has been climbing in its dominance. A lot of this has to do with the spot Bitcoin ETF, as well as just the way that the markets work. We're not fully risk on yet in terms of assets. You need interest rates to go down for risk on to come in. And when I say risk on, that means like investors piling a lot of money into risky assets. You need interest rates low, and you need money, like a lot of liquidity coming into the economy. We have money coming into the economy, but not a ton. We have interest rates paused, but it's not getting lowered. We're not back to zero. So we're not, as much as risk assets have done well in terms of crypto, the NASDAQ, et cetera, we're not fully risk on yet. That's the 2021. If you were around in 2021, that was just the insanity, the NFT mania, the DeFi mania, like it was just nuts. And that was because there was just so much liquidity. We're not at that stage of this cycle yet. And I think that's coming. And I think that's when ETH and other assets start to really outperform Bitcoin. So again, I think Bitcoin might have a move up when it gets the approval of the spot ETF, which could be this Friday, could be, I don't know, the 9th or 10th. It's sometime in the next week, most likely, if it gets approved. Now, it's not a guarantee, so who knows? But I think at that point, that's the top for Bitcoin dominance. And I think the rest of the year, the rest of the crypto market outperforms. And so I think we're sort of reaching the top now on Bitcoin's dominance. I think Bitcoin continues to go up. It's not like it's a bad investment by any means, but in terms of it versus the rest of the crypto market, I think we go sort of risk on here as that one tops out. Once we get Bitcoin spot ETF, my bet anyway, and again, this is not for sure, but I think that's when ETH finally has its moment. So just like ETH lagged Bitcoin in the last cycle at the beginning, and then all of a sudden ETH just shot up, I think we're going to see the same thing happen this time around with Ethereum. And the reason is once the Bitcoin spot ETF gets approved in the next week, now all eyes are on the ETH one, right? This last few months where we had just Bitcoin rocket up from in the 20,000s up to 45,000, this was really led because of that spot Bitcoin ETF speculation. And I think what happens is markets now are going to go and speculate that the ETH ETF will be approved in the coming months. Just like, over the last 2 months, we've been covering every update that happened on the spot ETFs, BlackRock meeting with the SEC, blah, blah, blah. We covered that all the time in the podcast. Now, and so did many other podcasts, so did many other newsletters, so did the big media outlets. That's about to happen for Ethereum. And so that's when Ethereum gains attention. People start diving into it. What is it? Learning more about it. Oh, it's deflationary. It's this and that. They start to understand its fundamentals, just like people have been doing on Bitcoin. And I think it starts to have a moment and it outperforms Bitcoin. Now, I'm not saying that Ethereum outperforms like the rest of the crypto industry. Like I don't think it outperforms Solana, et cetera. But I think it has its catch-up trade and starts to make a comeback. You can see here, it's kind of hit these lows as the ETH Bitcoin chart I have up on the screen. It's kind of hit its lows since June of 2022. And it looks like, we can't get any lower than that. It's been trying to, but it doesn't really go. And so I think we're going to shoot off from here once that spot ETF is approved. And I think Ethereum has a big moment. Ethereum has really lagged. It's lagged a little bit, and I think its time is coming. So that's my expectation. If I'm looking at Q1 2024, it's Bitcoin spot ETF approved, Bitcoin probably shoots up there, dominance goes up a little bit, and then it's big trade rotation of maybe Bitcoin into Ethereum. Maybe people sell Solana and go into Ethereum, but that one I'm not really sure yet. And the reason I say that, I'll get into Solana in just a second. But anyway, that's what I think is the Q1 trade. The other big thing that happens in Q1 is the EIP 4844 upgrade to Ethereum. And what that is it will make fees, the gas fees on layer 2s, decrease by an order of magnitude, so by 10x. And so if fees on Ethereum L2, are 10 cents, they go down to 1 cent, okay? If they're $1, they go down to 10 cents. Now, they're not $1, they're all somewhere around 10 to 50 cents, depending on, which chain it is, which L2. But so they're all going to go down to probably below 10 cents-ish at this point, to somewhere between 1 cent, if not below, to 10 cents. So it's going to make L2s a lot cheaper, a lot more usable. And I think that will drive a narrative. Remember, it's all about narratives in crypto, right? So the Bitcoin spot ETF was a big narrative. Now we have the Ethereum spot one, plus we have cheaper L2s. And so I think Ethereum does well. And I think the layer 2 tokens, that could be Optimism, Arbitrum, Immutable X, and so on. I think those catch a really big bid here and begin to do extremely well in Q1 2023 as a result of that upgrade and the speculation around the ETF. The ETF probably gets approved in Q2. We'll see what happens. So I think the next 6 months, Ethereum and its ecosystem are going to do really well. One thing to point out here for assets is, when does the money typically flow from Bitcoin into these smaller assets in crypto? I talked about the Bitcoin dominance chart, and we said that last year it peaked at around December 2020, but really it already started its move down, except for that big run it had over a month or two. It had its kind of run down early 2020. And typically what we see is when interest rates go down, that's when the risk on environment comes. And that's typically when the flow of money goes from Bitcoin into other assets. And so again, to go along with this thesis of, we have the upgrade to Ethereum, we have the spot ETF, and then I also think interest rates we have our first cut in the US in probably Q2 2024. And so there's a lot of catalysts that are leading to a more risk on environment, and that really benefit Ethereum in this instance. So I think, again, we see a big move on Ethereum. What happens with Solana at that point, and maybe the other L1s? They've already had a massive run this year. And to be honest, I think that probably continues. If we look at Ethereum last cycle, it had a huge run through 2020. And a lot of that was because it just sold off so much. Like, look at Ethereum didn't pass all-time highs until 2021, okay? It took until almost March of 2021 to pass all-time highs, even though Bitcoin did it in 2020, at the end of 2020. So Bitcoin actually hit previous all-time highs and surpassed it before Ethereum did, even though Ethereum just absolutely ran up from, I think it hit a low of like $85, but it just because it was sold off so bad, just like what happened with Solana. And so I think we'll probably see just Solana continue to rip upwards, because it still has a lot to catch up. And so I think we'll have another really big year in Solana. Even though it's ran up a lot, people are like, should I still buy this thing? Look, I think it still continues to do well. Maybe Ethereum takes a bit of the narrative in the L2s for a little bit. This one I don't have high conviction on. I have very high conviction that Ethereum outperforms Bitcoin after the CTF approval. I don't have a high conviction that Ethereum outperforms Solana as well. And so I think, again, holding both is the play here, and just holding them through all of 2020. The other thing to understand is, we are probably going to be like full risk on midway through 2024. So, Q2, maybe Q3 is when we really start to see the interest rates get cut, is when we really start to see the liquidity come back in, which means we've still got many quarters, many months left in this cycle. And so again, I wouldn't be trading your way through 2024. I think the best thing you can do is just, if you're not allocated, you get allocated now. Hopefully you already were. We've been screaming all of 2023 to get allocated, and just sit back, hold on to your hands, don't do anything, because again, there's going to be crazy swings up, crazy pullbacks. There's going to be narratives all over that, it should be L2s, it should be Solana, you should do this. The big mistake that people make is they try to trade and go from one asset to the other, right? Just because I think Ethereum's going to outperform here and it might outperform Solana doesn't mean you should sell your Solana and go to Ethereum, right? Have some Solana, have some Ethereum, let them both ride. Have some L2 tokens, because they're also going to do really well, I think. But it doesn't mean you should try to jump from narrative to narrative, right? If you saw the last few months, everyone was talking about Solana. Everyone was saying Ethereum was done and dead. And I think a lot of people capitulated and sold their ETH and moved into Solana, right? And now you have just today, Ethereum has now outperformed Solana because Solana dumped so much on this, right? Now, does that continue? I don't know. I'm just saying, you don't want to keep jumping from one to the other, okay? Especially in this sort of year when everything is just going to go up. We're going full risk on. It's likely going to be a really, really good year. So that's my advice to get started is I think Solana, Ethereum, its L2s do really, really well in 2024. And it happens a lot because of macro. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if we want to look at what's likely to happen this cycle, let's look at last cycle. You know what? Let's move to the daily. Right now I have the weekly up. Let's move to the daily so we can really see these swings so that you know what to expect. So today, if you were looking at markets, you might have got a little bit scared because things went down a lot, okay? Well, let's start at the sort of beginning of the bull market last cycle. So Ethereum went down in a matter of days, and this is from COVID here, but it went down almost 70%. Okay, in just a couple of days. So that was crazy. But obviously that's the COVID place. Like that's not going to happen. I don't think we'll hit that unless we have some sort of black swan event, but probably not. But let's just go here. This was even before things really took off for Ethereum. We had a 35% pullback. Okay. And then it shot up past all-time highs here. And we had another pullback, right? And this one is 36%. And this was just in a matter of days, literally in days. But then it shot up again. And then what do we have? Another pullback. This one's even more than 36, but this one was 62%, right? And then it shot up again and went to all-time high. So like, this is just, you need to expect these sort of pullbacks because it's very normal, very, very normal in the space. Now, the last thing I want to touch on of a comparison of last cycle that's really interesting right now and looks like what Solana is going through is those of you that weren't around, last cycle was the first time that we actually had like real apps in DeFi that you could do things on chain, okay? The previous cycle was just like you could invest in things and speculate, but there was nothing you could do. Last cycle in 2020, there was this thing called DeFi Summer. So in the summer of 2020, a bunch of apps launched on Ethereum, and they started to give yield. It was the first time we could really get yield at mass, at large, on Ethereum. And so during the summer of 2020, people were farming all these tokens. Everyone was getting yield. There was these airdrops. There was so much happening on chain that had never happened before. And it was a frenzy. You were going from one app to the next. You were putting your ETH here, you were putting your ETH here, putting your ETH here, and you were earning X APY. And a lot of it was these like food tokens like yams and sushi and all this weird stuff. It was a weird time, but it was fun and you could make a lot of money. And it was new and people didn't really know what to do, but it was just like, it was craziness, it was madness. People got scammed, people got rugged, but you could make a bunch of money and it was this like cool new thing. Well, we're seeing sort of that same experience happening right now on Solana. So Solana's narrative right now is DeFi. They're all launching tokens. Everyone is airdrop farming, and it's this like frenzy to like take your Solana, put it to use. And so it feels very similar to Ethereum in 2020. And so in Ethereum in 2020 during the summer, that was these times right here, right? Which we were still nowhere near all-time highs, if you can see on the screen. But after that summer, things just absolutely took off. People were like, whoa, you can actually do things on chain. This is so cool. And we ripped from $230 straight up to $4,400. Now straight up, there's obviously pullbacks, but that's what happened after DeFi summer. And I think what we're seeing right now with Solana, same idea, is like we're having all this airdrop farming and people playing in DeFi and like having fun again and using things on chain. And I think it just looks and feels very similar to that of Ethereum. Now, the other narrative of Ethereum that I haven't talked about, and I will talk more about this next week, is restaking. So Ethereum's not going to have its DeFi moment again. It already had it in 2020. And now, to be honest, like new people can't really come in and use Ethereum DeFi because it's quite expensive on the layer ones. Maybe the L2s will do this because they have more tokens they can launch and they can airdrop tokens, et cetera. So like we might have what we're having on Solana right now on layer 2s on Ethereum in Q1, Q2. I'm not sure. That's a big speculation. I don't really have a lot of like insider information on that. But I think we might see that because they need to compete. And so I think we'll see a bunch of tokens launch there. But anyway, not 100% sure. But what's happening on Ethereum right now that's just getting started is restaking. And so restaking is where you can take your staked ETH. So whether that's, your RETH or your STETH, and you can restake it again to get extra APY. And so there's protocols like EigenLayer that allows you to do this. And then there's like EtherFi and Swell and a bunch of others that allow you to sort of restake, earn extra APY. And as a result of them being new, you can farm the tokens when these new companies launch their tokens. And so it's a bit of a frenzy over on Ethereum with restaking right now, and it's brand new. They have caps, like it's not even full on yet. But I think that really picks up steam in the beginning of 2024. And so I think that we have two frenzies going on right now, which is the Solana DeFi. And to be honest, actually, the Solana one extends to Cosmos as well. There's like Injective and Celestia that all have sort of a DeFi frenzy going on right now. And then I think we have restaking over here on Ethereum. And so I think this is going to drive a lot of on-chain activity, a lot of liquidity, and create a big buzz and a bunch of noise, especially as all these companies launch tokens. It's like a stimulus package to all the users on Ethereum, all the users on Cosmos, all the users on Solana. And so that is going to be big for, I mean, people are going to sell those tokens probably and buy ETH, they're going to buy Solana, but they're also going to buy a bunch of NFTs. And so I think these frenzies, we'll see how long they go for. But one, you should be playing around with them because you can make a lot of money in them. But two, I think those are going to be a big cause of the sort of a catalyst for this next leg up. And I think those catalysts will drive us past all-time highs in 2024. I think I already did a predictions episode, so check that out if you want to see what my predictions are. But I think in 2024, Bitcoin, ETH, and Solana all go past all-time highs, and I think they shoot really far past it. I think Ethereum can probably reach 6,000 to 8,000 just in 2024. Bitcoin probably gets close to 100K, but let's see. That might be a stretch by the end of 2024. In Solana, it's still a very small market cap, so it could go to 500 by 2024. Either way, I think they all do really, really well. And I think the narrative on Ethereum, just to sort of recap here, narratives drive everything. And so I think what we'll see in 2024 is eSpot ETF, EIP 4844, which is cheaper for L2s, which drives L2 prices. Restaking, I think, is going to be really, really big. Hopefully there's no issues with it. It is new. It is a little bit risky. So hopefully there's no bugs or anything. But I think all of those really drive the big comeback for ETH. And then I think Solana just basically continue to do what it's done over the last couple of months, which is drive a lot of hype from these airdrops from new applications launching tokens. I think that continues on. They're sort of just getting started here. So there's still a bunch more of these to happen in Solana in Q1 and in Q2. And I actually think a lot of these companies were probably planning to do this later on in the year. And I think many of them have actually sped up their timelines, and they're going to launch their tokens even sooner because there's just so much attention on them right now. So those are the big catalysts for the two. I guess there's one more actually. Solana has Firedancer launching probably in the summer of 2024 if all goes well, which is Jump Trading's new validator client, which will basically take the throughput of Solana from about 60,000 transactions to potentially over 1 million transactions per second. And if that happens and that actually works and goes live, I think that's going to be a massive narrative for Solana. So there's a lot of bullish, let's say, upgrades and catalysts. And then that combined with what looks to be one of the best backdrops we have for macro since probably 2020 in terms of just like government printing, election year, interest rates likely going down. Like if all those things happen combined with these catalysts, I think 2024 is going to be a big year, which then sets us up for also a big 2025. It feels like we're going to have a very similar, as weird it is, similar cycle to last cycle, which was sort of a catch-up year in 2019, big year in 2020 after a bit of a dip, and then a massive year in 2021 with the top. And I think we're seeing that here. We had sort of our catch-up year here in 2023. 2024, we might see maybe we'll see a sell-off somewhere. Like we need some sort of pullback. Maybe that's just what we got today, and it's just a quick one-day one. I don't know. Let's see. But I think, again, we have a big year, and then likely 2025, another big year. Maybe we top somewhere around 2025. Maybe it moves into 2026. We'll have to see. That's all going to depend on macro and honestly on the tech. So last cycle, one of the things that happened was Solana was, as much as it was around, it had a lot of outages. And Ethereum just got so expensive that what we wanted to do on chain, just you really couldn't. A lot of people got priced out. And then there was like, the only other option was Terra Luna, which blew up, and then Solana, which kept going out. And everyone's like, okay, the tech's not as good as we thought. We're way overvalued. And then boom, we went down. That was also as a result of interest rates going down. And so that's the thing that I'm not sure of what happens this cycle. It seems like we might be good to go on the tech side in terms of Solana seems to have fixed its problems. Layer 2s are now basically ready and getting better and better every month here with these upgrades. And so like, I'm not sure that we're going to have the tech bandwidth issues like we had in the last cycle. And so maybe that means we can run for longer. But really, it's all going to depend on liquidity. So that's the big thing we want to look at, which I'll, of course, always keep you up to date on in Market Watch channel. But liquidity is what's going to drive this. Do we stay risk on or not? But as long as the tech can handle this amount of activity, because I think a lot of people will come into the space, then I think we've got a lot of room to run. Last note, actually, one thing to understand is that new people are still not in the space yet. All of this price action we've had over the last few months is basically just from crypto natives. And I mean, some TradFi people that obviously have caught wind of the ETF and have come in, but retail is not here. And we know that mainly because, well, a few reasons. One, if you look at Google Trends or Google Keywords, the trends for crypto, Web3, Bitcoin, et cetera, are only just starting to pick up, nowhere near all-time highs. And so that means there's still not a lot of people that really know what's going on. I mean, if you talk to most people in mainstream, they still have no idea about this spot ETF. They don't even know that all these assets like Bitcoin and ETH have ran as much as they have this year. Most people are just oblivious to it, which is wild. And so most people won't come back into the space until all-time highs, which is why, again, I think at whatever point we reach all-time highs in 2024, that's when likely retail starts to rush back in, and why I think we have a big 2025 as well is because that's when everyone comes back in, puts their capital in. Many of them will get wrecked, but luckily all of us, we're here early, and so it's not a big issue to us. That's another catalyst we have to look forward to, but we won't get into that. We'll talk about that another time. Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. I just wanted to cover what happened in markets today and where I think things are going. Next week, I'm actually going to talk about this restaking as well as the DeFi craze on Solana. I'm going to talk about what you can do with your SOL and your ETH, how you can farm airdrops, what specific ones you should do, as well as how you can earn additional APY, et cetera. And so make sure you tune into that. It's going to really set you up for this year. Hopefully you can make a killing off that. Other than that, we'll see what happens with this pullback that we had. Again, I'm filming midday, so who knows what happens by the end of the day, but I'll be on the roll up tomorrow and you guys can listen in there. I'll give any updates if anything happens over the next 24 hours, and we'll make sure to keep you informed on everything happening in this space. All right, friends. Well, thanks so much for listening. Please like, share, and follow us if you're not already, or subscribe if you're on YouTube. That's what helps us grow. So please continue to engage with our content and share it as much as possible. We want to have a big year, and we want to make sure that you have a big year. And so if you can help us grow, we will definitely continue to help you grow. Otherwise, thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and subscribe or follow so that you don't miss the next one. While you're at it, there's a link in the description for our free newsletter where we provide timely and relevant Web3 insights so you can confidently build and invest in Web3. Make sure to subscribe today. One final note. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and nothing we say is financial advice. Crypto and Web3 are risky, and you should never invest more than you're willing to lose. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.